everybody. I am Sarah from the Netherlands, Amsterdam, and I am here today to share with you my story, my healing story. I am very excited and very grateful to be able to share my story, and I hope that it can just encourage you, and I want you to know that yeah, it will get better and it can get better. I'm very excited and grateful to be on the Wall of Victory. TMS knowledge and Steve Ozanich's book, The Great Pain Deception, has changed my life completely. And yeah. So let me tell you a little bit about me and my story. It all began about 1.5 years ago, after a very stressful and emotionally challenging 2 years with a breakup and a lot of moving and just, yeah, too much stuff. I had booked my ticket to Sri Lanka. After Sri Lanka, I was planning on going to Nepal to go on a 2 weeks trek through the beautiful Himalayas. And after that, I was planning on traveling, running for a year. So yeah, I arrived in the beautiful Sri Lanka, and I remember walking out of the airport, like taking in the warm tropical air and feeling very happy and free. And as I sat in the tuk-tuk with the warm tropical air blowing in my face, I remember thinking, this is going to be a year-long vacation. It turns out now as very, very wrong. So I checked into my hostel, and that day we were going to go swimming. The next day I was going to start a 10-day Vipassana course, and I remember feeling very anxious about what might come up when spending 10 days in complete silence. So we went swimming that day in a waterfall, and I remember coming back to the hostel and I felt some bladder pain, and I immediately freaked out because I had a long history of bladder pains, of bladder infections, and I was freaking out, panicking, and by the evening I was in a lot of pain, so I had to cancel my Vipassana course. And now, looking back with all the TMS knowledge I have, I know my brain was helping me. It was creating a distraction for me, so because like the underlying emotions were too overwhelming, and they were threatening to overrun me. So my brain created a distraction, which was my bladder pain, so I could be acceptably removed from the situation. I think it was my way of coping, because I knew 10 days spent in complete silence was going to be too much. So yeah, my brain did me a favor. Of course, at the time I didn't have all the TMS wisdom and knowledge, so I completely zoomed in on my bladder pain, and I felt very alone and afraid. I was in a foreign country, so yeah, I did all kinds of tests. I went to see all kinds of doctors. They couldn't find anything wrong with me. And in the end, I ended up in the hospital with an IV with antibiotics in my arm, and I knew deep down it was not the answer, but I didn't really know what was. They did all kinds of tests. They did blood tests, urine tests. They even did a CAT scan, an MRI scan. And they basically gave me a clean bill of health and said, well, good luck with it. So I remember feeling very, very afraid, because if there's nothing wrong, why am I in so much pain? I flew home And I remember lying in bed in my old room in the attic, feeling very, very anxious, tensed up, and just slowly becoming more and more depressed. I was really an old shell of myself, and I was starting to lose my grip on life completely. My days were spent lying in bed, Googling symptoms and cures, and just trying to find the most comfortable position. My pain kept spreading. Now not only my bladder hurt, but my back, my thighs, my buttocks, my pubic bone, and even my genitals started burning. Sitting had become an absolute nightmare. My life had become an absolute nightmare. Of course, I went to the doctor and I started pelvic physiotherapy. But I remember feeling very skeptic about it. I mean, how was a few stretches going to help me if I was in a complete state of panic and fear? So yeah, I remember one day lying on the couch, typing in healing back pain on YouTube, and I remember coming across a video of a guy explaining how he healed himself of a lot of symptoms, including pelvic pain, by reading this book called Healing Back Pain from Dr. Sarno. And I remember feeling intrigued and I was curious, so I watched all of his videos and I ordered the book and I started reading. And even though I was still far from normal, I remember like slowly understanding the concept, but I think ego was still blocking full awareness. So with that in the back of my mind, I started a new, very expensive physical therapy program, which of course didn't work because my pain was not structural. So yeah, after that, the TMS word was just going around in my head, and I went online again and I found a TMS wiki. And on TMS Wiki, everybody kept talking about this man, Steve O, and his book, The Great Pain Deception. And I remember thinking to myself, who is this mystery guy, Steve O? I ordered the book, The Great Pain Deception, and I started reading it, and I remember feeling so moved by his story, and he immediately became my friend, my best friend, and he didn't even know it. And even though I really started to understand the TMS process, it was still on an intellectual level, like I wasn't really understanding it on a deeper level, I think because ego was still blocking full awareness. And besides that, I was still very, very anxious and still very depressed, really tensed up, and just a shell of my old self, really. So I decided to start taking some medication for my anxiety, which really helped me because it calmed down my nervous system a lot, so I was able to focus more and turn my focus on the outer world a little bit more, and I was not being taken up by just not losing my mind all day, so I could focus some more on healing. Yeah, by the time I had moved, and I remember lying in my new room on my lying on my bed, looking at a pile of books, which include Great Pain Deception, and I remember thinking of Steve, where he wrote in his book that he got the book Healing Back Pain from a friend, and he was reading it, and he got so angry about what was in it that he threw the book across the family room, only to pick it up again a little bit later because he was so desperate and something kept lurking. So I picked up The Great Pain Deception again, and I started reading it for the second time, and something just shifted. It was as if something was moving me through the pages. At that time I couldn't even send a text because the light of my phone would hurt my eyes, but I could read for hours. It was crazy. I was highlighting even more. I was nodding along, saying yes. I was laughing, and sometimes shedding a tear because his story moved me, and I really found hope. So I decided I was going to quit physical therapy, and I decided I was going to become more active. I remember telling my dad I wanted to become more active, and he remembered me that I used to rollerblade a lot, and I loved that as a little girl. So for my birthday I got new rollerblades, and yeah, I went rollerblading in the middle of Amsterdam. Off I went, and even though I was becoming more active, I was still really moving with caution, and still checking and rechecking my symptoms. I was still stressing and obsessing and TMSing really. I was still like paying too much attention to the distraction and not as much to the message. So I was doing a lot of things, but not really like understanding it on a deeper level. As Steve always says, it's not doing things that heals, but it is awareness. And of course, as you all know, I am a T personality, so I always find things to obsess over. And I was becoming more active, and I was becoming less afraid, but I was not listening to the reasons for my symptoms at all. So yeah, they were going to scream even louder. On Christmas Day, I had a scooter accident. It was nothing serious really, but I sprained my wrist and my ankle. And as I took some rest, my pain started spreading very, very rapidly. It was really scary. It spread to my other wrists, my other ankle, then my knees, my neck, my elbows. And I slipped into complete panic again. And even though I had read about it like a million times, this is the symptom imperative. I could understand it on an intellectual level, but it just wasn't. I just wasn't feeling it. I was still very afraid, and I knew it was just an outpouring of stress, and the injuries were just a perfect spot for tension to hide. And I knew I unconsciously needed my pain, but I just couldn't figure out why and what it was. So I knew I had to pause and reflect and really look at why I needed my pain, because that was going to be the answer, I guess. And in that process, I remember waking up one morning and a lot of my symptoms were gone, but I was again feeling the bladder pain. So I went to the doctor, and I asked them to do some tests, and they all came back negative. They said we can't find any bacteria. But I was still in a lot of pain, and I remember standing in the white doctor's waiting room, and it was just as if something came over me. I just had an epiphany. I remember standing there, and it was as if a light bulb went on in my mind, and I was onto it. The pain I had felt all day was gone in a fleeting moment, and that was because I was onto it. I could see it just in front of me. I lost a lot of my fear that day, and that was really a point of no return for me. I remember deciding right there and then I was going to live fully again. I was going to focus on life and no more hiding. So I went home and I decided no more structured healing. So I threw away all of my self-made lists and my self-made active programs, and I put all the TMS books back on the shelves. So that felt very, very good. But that again was, well, practical. So I knew I had to do the work and look inside. I knew I had to take care of me, really take care of me. And I knew that included making some really hard decisions. I knew a lot of my pain came from the conflict between ego and it, and the demands placed on me by me, from being good all the time but secretly not wanting to be good all the time. And I knew the child in me was not happy because I had a very controlling and demanding ego. So I decided I was going to do what was going to make me happy. And I told my friends and family I needed some alone time. I cancelled birthdays, baby showers, parties, because I needed to take care of that piece of me. I needed to be there for me instead of being there for other people. And I really started to see the big role the ego was playing in all of my patterns. And I felt like at that point I was beginning to see deeper and really starting to understand it on a deeper level instead of just doing things all the time. I also learned that, and again, this was also a long process. I also learned that I needed to create a loving space for all my emotions never acknowledged. I knew I had to make space for that by just being there, being still, slowing down, calming down, and just letting them come and go. And this felt very scary because I was not used to that at all. I was always rushing and running. So I started to practice turning to my emotions instead of turning away from them. And at first it was really, really, really scary. It felt like I was going to drown. And I remember coming home one day feeling very anxious, and I was thinking of going into the city to do some shopping, and then I thought, no, I need to be there for whatever is arising, and I need to acknowledge it, and I need to let it just come. So I laid down on my bed and I let whatever was there just wash over me. And I remember being very afraid, but after a while I felt I was still breathing and I was still living. And after a little while I learned that the emotional paradox of it all is that when I made space and room for my emotions, and when I honored them, they would just come, but they would like clear up after a while. Whereas I would keep them away, they would just always be there. It would just be this tense. I would just be tense and So yeah, it's been a hard process, and I'm still learning every day. I'm still learning and growing. I'm still practicing turning to emotions. Yeah, that's been a really important step in my healing journey. Yeah, I also learned, and this was also a very big cornerstone in my healing journey, that I needed my pain, that I had a really big unconscious need for my pain, and that was that I could only take care of me when I was so exhausted and in so much pain that I would just rest and avoid life. Almost as a justification. I used my pain as a justification to be able to rest or to take care of myself. So on a conscious level, I wanted nothing more than to be free of it, but on an unconscious level, I learned that I needed it, and it was my best friend, really, because it gave me the opportunity to rest and avoid life. So I thought to myself, okay, I have to learn to be able to take care of myself, to be loving and kind and compassionate to myself, regardless of my pain. So I tried to be kinder to myself, and this also included a lot of social stuff, just really being there for me and just listening to my needs and not listening to the ego. This was also a very hard process, and I'm still learning every day, but for me this has been a really, really fundamental shift in my life. And at first it felt very scary to listen to my needs, but now it just feels empowering. I remember repeating to myself over and over, self-care is safety, self-care is safety. It gives me a very empowering feeling, like it brings me a feeling of peace, that I know that I can really take care of myself. So yeah, that was a long process of growing and learning. And the symptoms were still there sometimes, but there were a lot of moments, hours and sometimes days, where I just forget about myself, and I would forget about the pain and healing and TMS, and just I started to focus more and more on life, and I started to enjoy life again, slowly. And I really began to understand the quote that says you have to see yourself as healed before you can heal. I really started to feel it, like in my body and on a deeper level. I was resuming life, and I remember after a few weeks of being basically pain-free, the pain came back with as if it had never left. I remember feeling very frustrated and angry. But once I stopped and paused, I knew the pain was there to teach me something, and that was that ego had taken over again, and I lost awareness, and I was being good everywhere where I didn't really want it to be good. So I had to look at myself again and check ego. And so I never thought I would say this, but the pain has been a really great lesson. And if I could go back, I don't think I would do it differently, or I don't think I would wish for no pain, because it has taught me so much about myself and about life and about the way I do things. I think I am a much more happy, peaceful person. and as you can hear, it's been a very long process. It wasn't just a switch or a big aha moment. It was a long, hard process, and it took a lot of practice for me. And as I am pain-free now, I still have some days where I get a stab of pain, but I know now deep in my heart that when I do, I am conflicted inside and that my body is fine. I really try to be accepting of whatever arises in the moment, and if that is non-acceptance, I try to be accepting of that as well. It still is a struggle sometimes, but it's a good struggle, if you know what I mean. Yeah, practice turning towards my emotions instead of turning away, and that gives me much more, peace. Also, letting go of fear was a really big, important one for me, as the quote in the Course of Miracles says, healing is essentially the release of all fear. I am really happy that I came across TMS, Dr. Sarno and Steve relatively early in life. It has taught me so much about the mind-body connection, but also on the complex thing that is the mind and on life. To Steve-O, you are my friend, my saint and my savior, and you always said to me that me healing would be your biggest thank you. So here it is, my biggest thank you to you. Happy healing, people, and remember, you are stronger than you can possibly imagine. Much love, Sarah. Bye.
And at the best of all, shower us in our world away. We alone will move to our own music as you hold me and I hold you in our rain dance. In our rain dance. In our rain. In our rain dance, in our rain dance, in our rain